Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Intercollegiate Exhibition. My name is Shadi Hanna, and I'm the head coach of esports at Keanu College in Fort McMurray, Alberta. And today I have the distinct pleasure of hosting our Esports at All Ages panel. We have some very, very knowledgeable and experienced panelists here today to share their stories about esports programming in Canada and what that looks like for gamers of all ages. So before we get started, I'd love to introduce our panelists. We'll start off with Carol. Maybe if you could introduce yourself to the Twitch chat.
Everyone. I've got a number of hats, I guess, that I wear with all of this. I'm a college professor, so I teach about esports as a content item and a little bit of accounting too. I work with students at the college, so I support the esports club and offer work integrated learning in esports. I recently started with Melissa here at the Esport Canada as the CFO and board treasurer. And I think most importantly, I'm actually the parent of two sons who've both benefited incredibly from being in esports. So one took the collegiate and semi-path route, the other played professionally in a global esports league. So I can attest all the good things that esports did for them.
That's amazing. Actually, I knew as you were talking, I was like, okay, I know that, I know that, I know that. But that last little bit, that's incredibly fascinating. We're gonna have to touch on that a little bit after. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Nathan, if you don't mind. Oh, Nathan is not in the Discord call. All right, we will. While Nathan's sorting that out, we'll move on to Anisa then. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Okay, hi, my name is Anisa Dahir. I'm the president of UFT League of Legends and also the vice president of UFT Esports. I'm here to represent university and collegiate level esports. I've been in esports for about like a year and a half now. I've been doing media, graphics, and now major event planning and team management for UFT. My goal is to make esports accessible to all walks of life and to build communities from the ground up. I think gaming is a safe space for everyone and it should foster healthy, fun, and enjoyable competition.
That's great, and I love the collegiate connection as well to inclusivity and providing opportunities to people.
Thank you.
Myself working in varsity space, sometimes you forget that gaming can be fun and it doesn't have to be super intense and crazy all the time. And it's good to know that there are people in Canada that are working to making sure that gaming is fun for everyone. And speaking of fun for everybody, there's no one better to speak to that topic than Melissa. We'll have you introduce yourself to the group as well.
For sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Melissa Burns, and I am the founder and chair of Esport Canada and the current CEO of Esport Canada. I started providing esports to schools back in 2016 when I started a program in Manitoba that has now become the Manitoba School Esport Association. I have an education background, but I've worked in a lot of different spaces in a lot of different ways, and am very passionate about creating inclusive environments for everyone to feel that they can game and excel and feel that they belong, and really looking at working with people across the country to really establish esports for everyone here in Canada. So it's a very much a by Canadians for Canadians kind of approach to supporting the ecosystem.
Great. Thank you so much for providing that very extensive portfolio of things that you do. It's so good to see that there's like all of this stuff happening in Canada and that there are people taking these initiatives and not just at the collegiate level where I think is probably the most well known or most prominent, but now we have esports in schools, and we have esports outside of schools as well, which I believe we'll have an opportunity to touch on a little bit later. I believe Nathan is still sorting out his technical
No,
difficulties.
I'm
Oh,
back. I'm back.
okay, perfect. Nathan, we'll have you introduce yourself then.
Thank you. Unfortunately, it looks like my school is just deciding whether or not we're going to ban Discord again at a perfect time. So we'll start off with my introduction. My name is Nathan Koblun, married, 4 children, director of middle years at the Manitoba School Esports Association, and I myself am the esports director for the EDS Dragons esports program at Dugald School, which is a K-8 school in rural Manitoba.
Great. Thank you so much, Nathan. And having both you and Melissa here to talk specifically about the Manitoba Scholastic Esports Association, I think is going to be great color for our conversation today, and being able to speak as representatives of one of Canada's three, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, three major provincial esport associations. Do I have that number right?
We No.
Okay. A shot in the dark.
That's
Shot in the
okay. We'll
dark.
get to that
Close,
later.
close.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's
All
all
right.
good.
All right. Okay. There's more. There's more. See, I'm learning too, and
There's
that's great.
more.
That's why we have these
Absolutely.
conversations, is so that we can all learn together. All right. So before I
Yeah.
embarrass myself any further, we'll get right into the meat of the matter, and we'll start, kind of painting a picture of Canada, and Canadian esports programming. Uh, kind of chronologically, so to speak. So, starting off in esports as a child or a youth or an adolescent in Canada, what are some of those first steps that you can take when it comes to the programming available in Canada? And I think a great place to start would be maybe to take a look at what's currently happening in the scholastic space. So Melissa and Nathan, we'll pitch this off to you. What are some of the things happening right now in the scholastic space in Canada, and particularly to both of your involvements in Esport Canada and MC? What does that look like at the elementary and middle school level?
I'll let Nathan take this first and pick up after that.
Well, I can definitely talk to the middle school and the high school level a little bit. So again, for ourselves, the local level, the school gaming clubs has kind of been the intro to a lot of us into esports. A lot of teachers around here in Manitoba running their own local gaming clubs, either as an extracurricular after school during lunches. It has kind of been our intro and what brought us together into what we have, which are current esport programs. So here at the middle school level, I run the EDS Dragons as a multi-titled esport program where we have students come and go depending on which title they want to participate in. We run them as seasons, so we run individual titles for particular times, and we try to take a look at these titles and these participations from the students in what I would call a multi-layered approach. So we take a look at, how do we help the student? How do we help teach healthy living? How do we teach and instruct skill-based learning? And through all of that, of course, the school plays a huge role in that, in accessing technology and in making sure students have what they need. Being a rural teacher, as we found out 5 minutes ago when I couldn't connect here, having access to internet. Being a rural school, we have students who don't have access to internet at home, and having the school play a huge role in that. And then, of course, while I run an extracurricular program, there are others. And I believe on Thursday you're going to get the chance to speak to somebody who runs an academy program in Alberta, which is a really awesome thing. Hearing a little bit about Travis Bouchard and what he runs out there. So that's exciting at the local level that we have at the middle years level. Provincially, we have organizations, and we have organizations that are run by teachers for students. The Manitoba School Esports Association, the Ontario School Esports Association, MC and OC. Again, we have teachers with teaching certificates who are looking at the best way to approach esports as both a competition tool, but also as a learning tool. And then obviously we have our national level, but this is where I would tag in Melissa.
Yeah, for sure. So absolutely building on all the stuff that Nathan just mentioned, when we're looking at the goals and objectives of the esports in education in a scholastic setting for K-12, it's being used in a lot of different ways as a tool for educators to really tap into their students, whether it is prioritizing belonging, whether it's prioritizing something in education we call global competencies, but those are your transferable skills. Those are your future ready skills, that communication, collaboration, critical thinking being a really, really vital one here. But when we look at particularly the elementary side of things, where perhaps it's not being as where the competition aspect of it isn't quite at the forefront the way we see in middle school and high school with the extracurricular programs, it is being used much more so as a tool as part of their education and looking at developing those skills. But we're also seeing a lot of parallels in program development that very much mirror what we see in early phys ed. So when you look at phys ed programs, the early years phys ed programs focus a lot on developing gross motor skills, fine motor skills, all of those foundational skills within the physiological and anatomy of the student so that they have the tools that they need to be successful when they start to explore different sports and activities in middle school, and then really refine those skills into activities that we hope that they will continue to enjoy and participate in after they've finished their scholastic journey. And so really we're seeing that start to now be displayed in early years programs where they're using competitive games. I'd say some of the most popular ones we're seeing are Minecraft, which albeit is not necessarily always considered an e-sport, but Mario Kart being another one that's extremely popular. Where they're developing a lot of these foundational skills that will allow them to then be able to transfer into middle school and high school um, exploration and skill development. And in terms of what we're seeing across the country, I know Nathan had mentioned MC and OC, but there's also this class, just because I have to share where we're at right now. Our goal with Esport Canada had been to activate Western Canada. So we've got a bunch of educators we're working with in Alberta. They don't have something solidified yet, but we're very close. Saskatchewan was able to establish an org this year. BC was able to establish an org this year. And Quebec has had a program for schools since, I believe, 2017, maybe even earlier than that with the FQSE. So there's lots of stuff happening all throughout Central and Western Canada. And next year, we turn our attention and focus into supporting capacity building in educators in the East.
That's amazing that there's been so much progress and growth in the last few years. I mean, when we talk about esports in kind of the collegiate level or interscholastic, 2014 is kind of, with the introduction of Robert Morris's program has been kind of acknowledged as like the starting point or the launch point for scholastic programming, and seeing, you were talking as early as 2016, 2017, the formation of some of these scholastic leagues as well, which is, if you're not in the space, you don't know these things. You'd never think to know, to look into that or to explore those things. I'd love to touch on a little bit kind of the transition or pathways from scholastic. And Melissa, you introduced a really interesting conversation about, at a young level, you're focusing on rather than, like that parallel to phys ed, rather than like playing sport, is you're developing motor skills. And then you go from motor skill development into, introductory or maybe simplified esport titles, rather than playing Smash, you're playing Brawlhalla, rather than playing League of Legends, you're playing Pokemon Unite. And then you kind of move into that high school level where maybe you're starting to take on some of those more complex games. And then there's that transition into that next phase where I think Carol and Anisa have that particular expertise, and they know kind of what that skill level or that competition looks like. Is there any focus on that transition out once you've gone through that scholastic process from high school to college? If there's any focus on that transition and what that looks like at the scholastic level?
If I could speak on that first,
Please.
we at UFT Esports, we do tryouts for like twice a year, every year for over like 6 teams for League of Legends, Valorant, CS:GO, Overwatch. I think we have Rocket League, Hearthstone, every sport you name it. I think we even started a Pro Tetris team this semester.
Oh my
But
gosh.
at UFT Esports, I know it's an esport. Everything's an esport nowadays. But for us, the path of pro is really important because collegiate level is just under the academy level, which is now named the challenges level for most Riot games, so Valorant and League. And at this level, a lot of players who do really well can get seen on scouting grounds and can now try out for a role on a professional League of Legends team or a Valorant team. And for players who are coming from high school esport levels, they could even start trying out as soon as like the semester before they even start first year, and they can start in the summer before they enter into university. At the collegiate level, there's a lot of things a player can do to make it professional, and also, again, work on these skills now that they are of age and can play more of these adult-oriented games like League and Valorant and like these shooters. There are universities with designated esports programs, such as like St. Clair, which has a giant department and funding and production for they have jerseys and everything to support their teams. At different universities, there are different levels of support, and I can say for UFT, the support is mostly community-oriented. We work hard within our teams to find production and staff, and we set up everything from the ground up. So for those who are not interested in playing, there's a lot of careers in esports through just production management, streaming, graphics, video, even team management is something I do personally. University level clubs are very inclusive, and they also offer some teams offer a mixed gender or a gender non-conforming league. And speaking of Pride, recently it has been Pride Month, and there are some leagues, and for example, like the North American Collegiate Esports Association (NACE), they offer a gender inclusive Valorant league, as well as Riot themselves offering VZT Game Changers, which is a women and gender non-conforming individuals Valorant league. So in terms of esports at the university level, there are a lot of initiatives through clubs and through people who are extremely passionate about esports that are now creating esports opportunities that transition from collegiate into the adult world.
So we can definitely identify like that inclusivity is a big goal of collegiate esport programs, and thereby scholastic programs as well, and being able to encourage kids of all walks of life to partake in esports and build into those opportunities when they grow up and move on to college. Outside of outside of that element, are there other goals that you have for yourselves, Melissa and Nathan, as scholastic esport program leaders, that you want to see in your students as they progress through and graduate from your programs?
Yeah, I can jump into this. So I would say, Melissa touched on what I would say are those core three skills that I look to identify for my program and for the coaches that I work with as the director of middle years here, right? Those interpersonal skills, those citizenship, digital citizenship, conflict management, learning to win, those soft skills, leadership, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, empathy, flexibility, and then academic success, which again, when we're talking about improved student engagement, improved problem solving speed, improved perception, those are like those three core areas that we look to identify when we are looking at the middle years level and again into the high school that we're trying to touch on. And for myself and my own program, which I can speak to, we really build that on 5 facets, right? So competition being the first one, practice, healthy living. We actually have parents come in during our games who cook meals for us on our game days, right? We talk about posture. We get into community building, and we talk about what our esports, what our EDS Dragons are, what it means to be part of our team. And then branches off into our streaming and showcasting program, which we're one of the only ones doing it on a consistent basis here in Manitoba, but we've got a number of people who are looking at also starting their own programs as well, and we're really looking forward at, again, creating opportunity for students to access our programs even when gaming and competition is not their line.
And if I can add on to that, something that, without getting too philosophical on this, there's also the question of what is the purpose of education in all of this. That does kind of have a little bit of a play in this. And the reason I bring that up is that when we look at the number of students that are participating in esports on their own outside of school, the latest Canadian statistic that was posted in November of 2022 was 89%. 89% of kids between the ages of 7 and 17 are gaming every single day. That is not a number that we can ignore, and it's not a number that we can look away from as educators. And so when we know that this is something that our students are engaged in, and we know that over 40% of that is identifying as female or gender diverse, but then we compare that to the professional leagues, and we see that less than 5% of professional esport players are identifying as female or gender diverse. We know that there's a problem. And so, if we want to give our students the best chance at having the opportunity to participate in something that we know that they're already doing anyway, but make it a really positive experience and change the culture so that they can continue to enjoy it in safe and productive ways for the rest of their lives, then we need to bring it into schools. We can't wait for them to be adults to have that conversation. We need to give them a safe place to fail at a school where the teacher can identify, that didn't go the way we wanted it to, or we didn't respond the way we should have, or did you notice this? A lot of noticing activities, so that then we can change the way the conversation ends and allow them to have that opportunity to grow rather than just rage quitting on their own in their basement at home. It's allowing them the opportunity to experience something different so that hopefully we are investing in the future, knowing that they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's a great point that I think often gets overlooked in the conversation. Is we're so focused on enforcing, you have equal participation at the highest level of play, when in reality it's at the lowest level that it matters first, or at the youngest level that it matters first, because that's what creates that long-term sustainable growth, as well, and that representation encourages that representation, as players get older and older and older. Um, from these goals that you've set for yourselves in your programs, do you have any success stories, or maybe specific positive experiences that you can draw on, from your programming, um, that you think you could share with the group to give us a sense of how your programming has impacted your students?
Absolutely. For myself this year, again, we compete in person. We were able to launch our esports, yeah, our esports arena. It's not an arena. It is a esports lab, and we've had a place for our community to meet and to game and to share stories with. But in being able to compete together, this brings me back to probably one of my favorite all-time moments of coaching, I would say. And I have an athletics background to go along with my esports background. But just recently, during our fall provincials in Rocket League, we had a team who was probably favorite or in the top three of the province, and we were waiting for the finals to start. And we went down 2 games real quick in a best of 5. And as anybody here who has done any sort of gaming knows, you've got quite the uphill climb. Now, Rocket League is very much a momentum-based game, for those of you who don't know. But being able to stop and call that timeout and just sit with my students for a few moments and to do those things you as a coach do naturally when it comes to athletics and be able to do that with them live right there, just again speaks to what it meant for me as a coach, and to look at this as a scholastic program. These students, I love them to death. If they'd been playing in their basement, would they have stopped, reflected, brought themselves back together? Would they have taken that time to look at each other as a teammate, to take a couple of deep breaths, to practice some mindfulness in the moment, and to come back? And they turned around and they won 3 straight. And you watch them actually in the final game go down 3 goals, 2 minutes left in the game, and they pulled it back together. And you just watch the entire air clear. As we were doing it during our parent conferences, and we actually had parents coming into the room watching this happen. We had it streamed live outside of our office, and parents were walking by. It was an energetic moment, both for my program and for these students. And right now, we are at the end of our school year. Our students are reflecting and talking about their moments. And this one has come up not just as a memorable moment for my students who were participating in this tournament, but as students who were walking by, who were part of the program, who were there witnessing this. And it only happened because it happened in our school, and it brought our community together.
Yeah, amazing stories like that can only happen when you have the support and the infrastructure to build it. And it's amazing that you know these things that we've theorized about esports, and these storylines and narratives that as esport enthusiasts we're so familiar with, to see somebody on the outside looking in, or maybe for the first time experiencing that, and sharing that, through this vessel of esports and at the scholastic level, is so amazing. Um, and it really gives credit to the importance of coaching at that young level. I wanna take this conversation and kind of push this now. You have these students that are learning these incredible skills, the ability to stop, pause, and reflect, to think. Not even talking about their game skill. I mean, that's a whole different can of worms there. But going from that scholastic training and now progressing into collegiate. Carol, as a collegiate program advisor or lead, what kinds of qualities are you looking for in your students, or qualities are you seeing in students that have come out of high school with a lot of gaming experience and now are participating in your program?
I think leadership, because they do have the experience that they've received from being maybe the leader in their team. So now they're ready to step up a little bit, maybe becoming a team manager as helping out in our community. We're not a varsity sport where we're incredibly focused on competition. We're very much focused on the community aspect. So they're able to sort of run off with their teams, coach their teams, work with their teams when they come from, like you say, the high school experience. But I think at my school, at least, the focus is very much on the broader community.
And Anisa, for you at the club level as well, I know there's not always a ton of recruiting, but it sounds like you guys do tryouts before your semester starts. So when you're trying out players, in your case, for example, for your League of Legends team, what are you looking for in those candidates that are going to be playing for your team in the upcoming fall?
What I look for the most, I recently did a lot of hiring for my staff team, and now we're about to do tryouts. So the biggest thing for me personally is initiative. I like to look for people who are passionate because a lot of people apply with high rank. A lot of them are like, oh, I'm the top rank of the game, I should be on the team. But it's not necessarily about how good you are, it's about how good you are as a teammate. Like, are you going to get upset and quit? Are you going to get upset and stop trying? Are you going to swear at your teammate? I'm looking for people who are resilient, open to feedback, and are eager to take advice as well as dish out advice. I'm looking for people who are good team players and people who are capable of working in a team environment and a professional team environment and a respectful environment as well.
And it's stories and programs like what we see at MC and OC and all across the country that are developing this talent pool that fits that criteria. So clearly, as I always find that esport panels sometimes tend to devolve into a bit of an echo chamber because we all love gaming so much, and we all see the benefits, but what often gets kind of viewed from the outside is all of the risks associated with gaming or some of the negatives. So kind of pulling this back to our scholastic experts here, how do you address some of those concerns for people who have reservations about introducing esports in schools, in high school, and how do you compare and contrast the general perceptions and stigma around gaming with the very real, positive experiences that you've been able to build for your students?
I mean, being at the middle years level, when you're dealing with grades 6, 7, and 8, I've had more than one parent send me an email that has said, "Why isn't my kid outside?" And
Wow.
it's something, right? And I'm not going to fault them on that because those are valid questions that I need to have answers for if I'm going to sit here and run a program. And these are the same questions that I'm sure athletic directors 60, 70, 80 years ago, as they were starting to bring things like phys ed into schools, were also asking, why isn't my kid doing math? Why are they running around?
You're right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like we are still starting something. And as much as we can go back and draw back on some of our dates, my program has only been around since 2020, and a lot of our programs, we are still helping launch and get kicked off, even though we've been doing small extracurricular things off to the side. So my first thing I say to parents when they have questions is I try to get to them before the questions come out. And we run a parent night at the start of every year. I bring parents in, we do a presentation, we have an evening where they can ask questions in a forum, and I'm going to stand there and I'm going to answer them. And those questions are often about, what is my student gaining from this? And I talk about those skills that we talked about earlier. And, what is my child going to come out of this with? And thankfully, I know that we have been in a position where, and I can say specifically Keanu College because you're right here, you came out and Shadi, it was awesome to have you at our expo in May, and to be able to show parents who had questions what opportunities there were for them. And we had the University of Winnipeg that was there as well representing, and we had Lotus 8 representatives who were there, so that parents can see what these opportunities are before we even get into the skill development and the program development pieces. When we take a look at like what those reservations are, there is the other side though. It's not just about parents; it's about schools and the school programs. Who's gonna run these programs?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a question that I get a lot from coaches and admin that I reach out to about starting these programs up, because we are adding, and middle years teachers, I don't know how many of them you've had conversations with. We are our shoulders are full, and part of my job with the Manitoba School Esports Association is working with coaches and admin and programs into how can we make this manageable? How can we enter one title? How can we acquire the equipment? And those are the conversations I've been having here at the end of the year and going into next year. How do I help set these programs up for success? So when somebody comes in, they have resources with them. If I'm going to coach soccer, I can pull up a manual with drills. I can pull up a manual that has how-tos. That doesn't exist for titles in esports yet.
Right. Right. So Melissa, I want to direct a question to you kind of along that same vein about, growing your program, sustaining it, and being able to argue its merit. What value, as someone so invested in the development of scholastic esports, does the support or recognition or acknowledgement from a collegiate esport program have or mean for you in the scholastic space? Is it a relationship you look on positively or fondly, and vice versa? How can elementary and high school programs kind of support collegiate programs in their growth and endeavors as well?
Mhm. Well, in my position in my day job, I deal a lot with policy development, a lot with Department of Ed, and with a lot of the senior leadership in school divisions. And something that comes up regularly, especially in this post pandemic era, is looking at prioritizing needs. We have students that are lagging in math and literacy, but they're also lagging in a lot of those social skills because they didn't have the same kind of interactions as they normally would have. And we're seeing the impact of that academically and socially. So a lot of the time, attention, effort is being put into those areas and supporting teachers in bringing up these students' needs in those areas, but that comes at a cost. They're looking at how are we supposed to add another piece to a teacher's plate when we have these bigger, like presumably bigger issues to tackle, and they're not seeing how those things actually coincide and how they work together to support a student's development. So seeing successful post-secondary uh, programs and opportunities for our students to then continue what they've started in high school gives them another little piece of that proof of concept and that proof of value that shows senior leadership that this isn't just another fun game. Yes, they all recognize that it is definitely a piece of belonging for our students, which is valuable. But when they see this huge laundry list of deficits that they are trying to tackle, they need to see that putting effort into this area is actually going to um, be a return in value, and see that return on investment come through for their students as they support them both academically and socially. So absolutely, the stronger the programs are post-secondary, the stronger we're going to see our programs thrive and grow and develop in the K-12 space.
Yeah,
And just to add to
please.
that too, no worries. Like we're watching, and I know Shadi, you and I have had conversations in the past about us teachers who are following and tracking the collegiate teams and the collegiate stories. We're looking to where we can help guide our students and program wise. We're watching. It's great.
Yeah, I think a big benefit of the collegiate involvement is like giving scholastic students like something to look up to, right, when they graduate, and giving their parents something to look up to. So I want to kind of push this toward to Carol for you at Georgian. What are some of your program objectives, and are you kind of, when you're planning your programming, are you keeping in mind what's happening in the scholastic space? Do you have separate objectives for your program? Do your students have separate interests? Like, paint that picture for us.
Well, again, we're very much a club program. So what we're focusing on is just making community and connections with our students. We are trying to provide them with work integrated learning. I think that's a big part of our work as well.
Mhm.
So when we're in terms of a club, we have them get hired for actual positions to work on those things. So we have a social media person, I have a graphic design person, I have somebody from sport admin to help run things. So I think that makes a big difference in our clubs, that we can offer them those valuable experiences, in some cases even pay to be involved with that scene.
Right, right. So in a sense, we're talking about career readiness, and helping students at the college level start thinking about that next major chapter in life, which is their
And
work.
that's where we tied into the curriculum. Being sort of a professor, I guess my focus is always on how do we support the curriculum that exists. So that work integrated learning is a work placement, it's a co-op, it's a recognized work experience, not just, oh, you're a club leader. It's the school recognizes it, the community recognizes that it's.
So would you say there's a benefit then for students as they go on to graduate high school, college? They go into their first jobs and maybe they're starting to enter their late 20s and 30s. What are some of the benefits that gaming has for that age group? Now we're talking about kind of post scholastic collegiate era. Where does gaming fit into that group?
I love how actually the Melissa and others have already mentioned the idea of transferable skills. There is so much that's available within the esports world, which isn't limited to esports. So, leadership and teamwork and communication. I remember my sons were incredibly shy. And when they had to go and they got interviewed after a match, they suddenly learned how to do public speaking very quickly. And because they were enthused about it, they were able to integrate it. So I think it's the additional benefits that way. Same the other ones that we were talking about earlier, all the social skills that all fits in the high school scene as well.
Right. Anisa, kind of you're in a
Yeah, if
similar
I could touch on
perspective
that.
working with the collegiate group. I'd love to hear kind of how you've seen that play out at U of T.
I can say specifically for my university, I'm very proud to say that players who either do not want to play as a teammate anymore can then transition into coaching. We've had a lot of players turn over into coaches, into support staff, into even just team managers, team leaders. And then even further on from that point, we have alumni who have gone on into the Riot ecosystem and become coaches for official esports teams and organizations. And I noticed there's a lot of, once again, the interpersonal skills and the transferable skills that even can just branch out into just general jobs in media, broadcasting, once again.
Yeah, and Melissa, you introduced this idea of gaming in the post-COVID era. How do you see gaming being a resource or a tool now for community building and socialization? For all age groups. Now that we've grown accustomed to social distancing, playing and working from home, etc. Where do you see gaming and esports programming fitting into all of that?
I think that it's actually opened up a lot of really cool opportunities and avenues because it allowed people to try something that was previously still stigmatized to a certain extent. I don't think overly, but there were a lot of folks who wouldn't have identified themselves personally as gamers and still saw that as not necessarily a positive thing, who now are very comfortable with saying that they game. So, my mother in law, for example, she is an avid Candy Crusher. And while she
My
would
mom is the
never
same.
have previously considered herself a gamer, now recognizes that, oh, wait, this is something that I can do with maybe not Candy Crush specifically, but other games that she can now use as a way to stay connected with her sister who lives on the East Coast. And there's just so much more interconnectedness, even intergenerationally, where different generations are finding the opportunity to connect and play together. I think that there's a lot of power in play. And I think that when we look at a lot of the tensions that come from just everything that's going on in the world, having that opportunity to slow down and play with someone is really a beautiful thing. And I think that's something that is definitely something we want to see continue to grow and thrive. And I think no matter how competitive or non competitive you are, you can see the benefit of that and can think back to a time when you had those moments where you connected either with a game, through a game, with another person because of a game, even just the study of music from video games and how it connects to people on a
Mm,
much
mhm.
deeper level than even music from movies, because it's not that character's song, that's your song. Because you have all those hours and hours
Right.
associated with the things that you did to that soundtrack. And it's very powerful. And so I think that there's a lot of untapped research in that. But I think there's also this really cool piece that came out of the pandemic and out of gaming and the use of gaming in schools, where we are now starting to recognize that you can work remotely, because this is something that I've brought up a few times in other interviews, where previously people had to make a choice between either staying with their home community and being there and being part of that space, or moving to a larger urban center to get a higher paying job. And even within urban centers, moving to a different neighborhood to be closer to that higher paying job. But the pandemic showed us that it is possible to still have a productive society and a productive economy while allowing people to work remotely. And something that esports in education really does well, and especially in that post-secondary space too, is it gives them those transferable skills that allows them to work those high paid jobs remotely, so that it is no longer a choice between the high paid job or home community. You can have that high paid job and continue to contribute to your home community economically and socially. And I think that once we start to tap into the power and potential of that, we will really see some really cool change.
I love the connection between like gaming from home and working from home. It's one skill that we didn't explicitly touch on, and I know that's because not every game takes place on a mouse and keyboard. But for me, I learned to type really really well from playing League of Legends. Because if I wanted to tell my teammate that they were trolling my game, I had to be able to
The
be
type
able to do
fast.
it quickly before the
100%.
minion waves spawn. So for me, I think there's those additional skills as well of like training young people for the future digital economy, and then as they get older and they start building careers and building families, having those skills become kind of second nature to them, is also crucially important. Where do we see the future of gaming for adults and seniors now? I mean, we haven't touched too much on the seniors, so maybe I don't want to get ahead of myself here. But as you get older in life, and Melissa, you mentioned your mom and her Candy Crush, and I'm sure other people have parents or grandparents that are avid gamers. What does that look like now, and where do we kind of see that direction evolving as the current generation of gamers become parents and grandparents? And this is for the whole group, so please jump in.
Oh, if I could start on that one first, though,
For
as I
sure.
guess the youngest gamer here.
Okay.
Um, I think when I was listening to Melissa, I was thinking about chess as an esport as well, because chess is now totally boomed during this COVID era and now post-COVID. But chess is like 1,000-year-old game, but like my grandfather plays it, my father played it, I started playing it, and chess is something that's universal now that everyone understands and now completely played online as an esport. And then when I think about esports as you transition older, I think about games being accessible, and I think accessibility being the most important factor of that. I think games for people who are a lot of games, like for example, Apex Legends has like color blindness or things for people who have hearing issues, as well as visual comprehension and clarity. Those are things that we as individuals who are able-bodied take for granted, but in the space of esports, it's actually very important because often a lot of people are actually colorblind. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe in 1 year for League of Legends Pro, there was a team that was almost majority colorblind. And you wouldn't know that because they don't really talk about it, but accessibility is really important for games like these, especially at the competitive and collegiate levels. And I think for transitioning into people who are older as well as adulthood, games that are lower stakes, more casual, and simple to understand are very important. And I like how Nathan was talking about Rocket League earlier, because Rocket League was actually my example for that. Because Rocket League is just soccer but with cards, and I feel like all of us can understand how that game works, and it's very fun, even as a person who's horrible at that game. And I think Rocket League is an example of a game that is very easy to understand and easy to introduce to people, but a great family moment or just online moment for your friends to play online, like at any age.
Yeah, the title itself has definitely been the core, the backbone of what we've done at the middle years level up until this point. Right, it's athletics adjacent. It's fast paced. It's really easy to explain to parents and spectators. It's familiar, and so when we take a look at right, like all those different connection points, the title itself does a really good job of those things. Not to go too off topic, though. I mean, as we take a look at, my background in gaming too, I learned JRPGs and storytelling games from sitting on my grandfather's lap and watching him go through Final Fantasy VII. And I think again, like so many of us have those stories of the way that it is. the way that our connections have come from those who have come before us. And, those first times you beat your dad at NHL 93, and the first time he takes away my Sega Genesis for throwing my controller. And like, it's a really important connection point, the way that, as I get older, I'm really looking forward to having those moments with my own kids. And that's been one of the driving forces for me being a part of esports at the scholastic level.
Yeah, I remember William Collis, the author of the Book of Esports, did a TEDx presentation, I believe, or TED presentation, where he talks about towards the end of it, making memories with your family. And, instead of, 10, 15 years from now, instead of sitting down on the couch and watching, the World Cup together, families are going to be sitting down together and watching the League of Legends World's Finals together. And that's going to be like a family bonding experience for the next generation. Um, we've talked about all these different games, and Anisa, you mentioned Rocket League specifically as being a game that you feel, as well as chess, as being two games that are pretty accessible and adaptable to people of all walks of life. Are there any other games or gaming adjacent experiences that you have identified as being particularly well-rounded or well-suited for young and old people alike?
Um, of the games I play, generally, usually competitive games, especially shooters, are not the most accessible due to like the high stress and high tension of the situation and the speed of everything. But there are a lot of games, commonly rhythm games. I recommend OSU, although not OSU for too long because I did get like basically carpal from OSU, so I had to quit. But like games like
My goodness.
Osu or like rhythm games are very fun to play and great for the family, as well as fighting games. I think fighting games are generally the most diverse community I've ever seen in gaming. I notice a lot of people who are different races, different genders, because fighting games are something that I also started playing very young. I'm 20 now, but I remember when the Wii came out, I was playing Brawl with my family, but the controller was secretly unplugged because they didn't want me to play.
Right.
But for
Oh my God.
fighting games are something that are very casual in conception, but actually have created a large esports scene. So you can go play Smash with your little cousin on the weekend, and then go play Pro Smash next weekend. And there's a lot of small communities that help you play these type of fighting games. I think of Street Fighter 6 that just came out, or Guilty Gear Strive, that have very encompassing tutorials and very large communities that are friendly and want to help people because they want more people to play these games.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, please, Go.
As the senior person here on the committee here, I do want to stand up actually for a lot of the other games. We've got a great Ontario streamer. He's Gamer Dad TV. He plays League of Legends. You guys are all saying, "Oh, it's so difficult." He's older than I am, and he's rocking it. He really is. There's been some great examples in CS:GO, which again is considered a shooter, FPS, where you think maybe the old folks can't handle it. Well, when old folks are playing with old folks, you're on an equal playing ground and you can really enjoy a wide variety of games. So I think my biggest advice for older people is find what you enjoy. If you love the visuals, you love the gameplay, you love whatever, there are communities starting to develop for all levels and competencies of play, not
Right.
necessarily age generated, because this is a really big opportunity. A bunch of you touched on it here before about building community. So whether your community is just a bunch of people who are very low on the rank, no matter what age you are, you don't necessarily have to just play with the seniors home. Although I think Melissa was mentioning there was a seniors home league. I think that's a fantastic opportunity. Unfortunately, they're the exception rather than the rule right now.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation where you kind of have to walk this fine line between catering to a group and gatekeeping a group. Making games that are good for old people implies that there are games that are not good for old people. And that's a bit of a challenging conversation. I do have to say I tend to agree that some games are easier to get into than others. Like I would argue that even when you talk about fighting games, I think a platform fighting game is a lot simpler conceptually than a game like Street Fighter, where you have multi-input combos that are incredibly difficult to execute consistently or regularly, versus Smash, where you press the funny button to kill on about half the cast, right? So there are some games that I think have that lower entry point, but that's not to say that you know you can't play a more challenging game because of your age, your race, your gender, etc. Right? I think that's where we have to kind of avoid the gatekeeping element. Um,
And
and
I'm
on
gonna add on to this as the only person who didn't get to say anything about games for older people. I think it'd be really cool to see some research. I'm gonna use this as a ping for potential research, seeing as I've got a stream full of potential collegiate folks looking at the impact, the neurological impact of playing some of those, I guess, presumably less accessible games that we're assuming are harder for older folks, what impact it actually has on their synapse, on their processing, and all that kind of stuff. Because I know that they have seen, we've done studies, and we've seen the impact of physical activity on improving, sustaining, and improving people in their older years. That there is no point where you've gone too far, that if you start an activity, you can either maintain or improve yourself. I'm curious to see whether these games, these even the more challenging games, whether they would have a similar impact on your neurological uh, development and sustenance or sustainability. Yeah.
it's a great point that these games, they're educating in a lot of ways, right? And obviously at the scholastic level we know that, but rarely do we think about how it educates for older populations and generations as well. um I guess maybe to kind of push on that a little bit, is there anything with gaming that maybe an area of the conversation that we haven't quite discussed or touched on yet, where gaming can help to foster that equity, diversity, and inclusion, not just within the confines of age, but we've discussed briefly race, gender identity, even income, like family income, and where people are coming from in life. How can gaming kind of help to bridge some of those gaps as well? Anisa, we'll start with you on this one.
If I could touch on that one, I'd like to say that, at least from my experiences in the gaming, one thing I've loved the most about it is that I'm behind a screen. No one's coming for me or harassing me for anything about like my gender, my race, or anything like that. So gaming itself is inherently inclusive because you're just a player in the lobby. You're not, a black person, a white person. You're not a woman, a man. You're just a person. You're a gamer. You're another one member of the community. And that's what I love the most about gaming. That's what I've been trying to foster within my community. And in the terms of inclusivity, gaming itself has progressed a lot in the past decade. I can say games have came out with a lot of new characters, a lot of new models, designs that are now more inclusive in terms of body type, body shape, gender, race. I think about the most recent like Apex characters. Apex again has a lot of women, men, gender non-binary characters, and Bloodhound, even native characters or indigenous characters. And I think gaming is moving towards a very healthy space now, especially in terms of broadcasting. I think again to the League team and the Valorant teams, how I think recently I've been watching a lot of Valorant because of the Valorant Tokyo, and I see the team and I see the host is Yinsu and she's an Asian woman, and then I see another woman, Pansy, casting, and then on League of Legends I see Raz, who's East African black man, and I'm like, wow, seeing these people now makes me feel very hopeful because now it's like, oh, that could be me in 5 years if I keep going at this, God forbid, like everything keeps going well, no esports under. But I think gaming is moving towards a really healthy space. And in terms of technology wise, I think I used to play League of Legends on my laptop and it used to like sound like a steam engine. And if we invest a lot more into the high school and elementary levels for computers, uh, I'll continue. At this elementary and high school levels for inclusivity of devices and technology, we can start implementing games that are free to play at younger levels, and even just having our children start playing Minecraft to learn how to move their mouse in like an FPS or 3D world.
Yeah, I think having uh, that representation in games, in both the characters in the game, but then also in the community around those games, and having high profile representation on broadcast or even in professional talent can be incredibly inspiring for future generations. We'll round out our conversation today with, I guess a bit of a future outlook. We've talked about all of these amazing things that are happening in Canada today. As we speak, this is not theorizing for people in chat right now. These are things that are happening in our communities as we speak. But as we move forward and we start to build towards larger and stronger programming initiatives, how do we envision the future of esports for children, for teens, for adults, and for the elderly in Canada? Nathan, I'll throw that one to you first.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a unique story in my entry into esports, which is I've always gamed, I've always had fun with that, but I was a very athletic individual growing up. And when I turned 20, I had my first cardiac arrest and I collapsed. And when I woke up, 2 weeks later, I was told that your life has changed. And if you do anything to get your heart rate above about 100, 110, I'll have another cardiac arrest. And I've tried multiple times. I have the defibrillator in my chest to prove it, but 8 cardiac arrests, and that holds true. I am not able to participate in traditional athletics anymore. And that's okay, because as I've come to learn more about myself and what that looks like for me, I've also come to find mirrors of myself in my students. And there's a number of students in my school who aren't able to participate in traditional athletics for a number of things, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional or mental reasons, that traditional athletics is not their path to success and self-efficacy. And this program serves a number of communities. I want to be very clear. I have a number of people who are successful in traditional athletics that are also well served with the EDS Dragons. But I also have a community who is not served through traditional athletics, who come here and it's the best part of their day. And no, it's not just because they played video games. It's the best part of their day because they were able to be successful and they were able to win and they were able to impress the people around them. It was their winning moment. So for myself, as I take a look at that and I take a look at what my dream is for this program, right? My dream is that my kids will have access to participate in an esports program at their school if they choose to. That their program will offer them the skills that I've learned through traditional athletics, and that if this is their passion and this is their skill, that they also have the ability to navigate a system in Canada that pipes them toward professional opportunities, whether as a pro player, streaming, shoutcasting, content creation, business management, or any of the other 100 jobs that you might find in Coach Allen's book. Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, and for those of you that aren't aware of what Nathan's referencing, he's referencing the I think it's 100 Jobs in Esports by Coach Alney, who works for NACAD, the National Association of Esports Coaches and Directors. Melissa, any thoughts on the future of gaming in Canada, and maybe give us a sneak peek on what you're up to over at Esport Canada there.
Yeah, sure. So we know that there are lots of awesome things happening all across the country that are serving Canadian gaming communities in all their various facets. And so what we are doing and doing more and more intentionally is looking for opportunities to connect with the good things that are already happening so that we can amplify it and we can start to advocate collectively. So we've got a bunch of things that we are working on for this coming year. We've made a lot of strides and a lot of progress over the past year. And we've got so much more that we have in the works that is coming up. For the EDU space, as I mentioned before, we activated all of Western Canada. We are working on the Atlantic provinces in the coming year. And the plan after that is that there has been a call for support in terms of curriculum development. So we're looking at what are the options for, and we've already have received nods of support from a few departments of education and a few faculties of education from institutions across the country around the creation of a pan-Canadian esports curriculum framework, similar to that we already have for science. So, looking at how we can be much more intentional in our approach to it and start to develop capacity and pedagogy amongst educators. So, in the EDU space, that's definitely what we're doing. I think Carol can speak a lot more to the plans in the post secondary space. And for our competitive space, we are working with different provincial orgs across the country, helping find communities for folks that don't have a provincial org and looking at how we can best support the work that they are currently doing and work together to build sustainable infrastructure. We want to make sure that our foundation is strong. We want to make sure that we are being very intentional about the work that we're doing so that the work doesn't stop here, that it continues on for many, many, many generations and continues to thrive regardless of any of the other external factors that may come their way.
Awesome. Well, Carol, I think Melissa passed the mic to you, so we'll let you close it out. Bring us home.
That sounds great. I think Melissa really hit the key word here is that we come up with a system. So in the collegiate space, I think what we want to do is connect more with it so that we have a seamless pathway all the way through, that we build upon what's there rather than reinventing it or trying to create things. Right now, we've been doing a lot of creation in silos. So these conversations where we all get together, if there's a framework that's developed in high school, well, then we can build on it in our post-secondary curriculum, right? We have pathways in management, marketing, and event management. Well, what other areas now can we develop to help bring those career opportunities and not limit this to the kids are just playing video games? And
Right.
it is focus on the industry of it and make it a pathway right from a young age to get up into that industry.
Right. Um, Thank you, everybody, so much for all of your thoughts and commentary today. It's been really great to hear your insights and your experience from each of your various ways of involving and contributing to the growth of the Canadian esports scene. So, on behalf of the Canadian Intercollegiate Exhibition, thank you all for sharing your thoughts today. Um, we'll be rounding out our panel discussion here. Um, so please stick around for the rest of the events. I believe we've got one panel coming up next, and I'm just going to check my calendar so I don't lie about which one it is. It's Get Coached in about 30 minutes. So if you're interested in learning more about esports coaching and how that works and operates, not just in Canada, but kind of globally, approaches to esports instruction, make sure to tune in about 25, 30 minutes for the next panel. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day.